in your introduction to your book, Being There, Why Prioritizing Motherhood in the First 3 Years Matters, you wrote, "The truth is we can do everything in life, but not at the same time." I think there was a famous Atlantic article, Why Women Can't Have It All. Mm-hmm. Was it Ann Savage was her name? Why we can't have it all, at least not at the same time. And you go on to say, we cannot raise healthy children if we are not there for them, physically and emotionally. We cannot be present for them while being intensely involved with work or other interests that make us less mindful of and attentive to the emotional needs of our children. Now, the rest of the book, of course, unpacks this. So let's unpack it. Let's start with the current status quo of working parents and families. You saw this. This is what got you into this line of research to begin with. You saw children suffering. What are some of the statistics you can share about how many mothers are working right now and the different ways that children are being raised and the outcomes that they're experiencing?
Well, how many mothers are working? I think in America, and I get confused with the statistics because I work a lot in Europe too, but I think it's 80%. So a lot of women work.
Full-time or some form of work.
Yeah, some form of work. And what was the other question you asked?
Oh, and to clarify, obviously all mothers work.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Child rearing, but we're talking about employment outside of the home significant employment outside of the home. What have you seen? You saw some of these trends in your own practice, but in terms of the quality of children, their mental health outcomes, their emotional outcomes, after the first 3 years, how do you see the correlation between big picture mothers increasingly out of the home and children and their outcomes of not having their mothers for quality and quantity time?
Yeah, well, the Pew Research Organization did a study to show that working mothers spend on average no more than 90 minutes a day with their children under the age of 1, I think. And just simply put, it's just not enough time to raise healthy children. And what I mean by that is children are born neurologically vulnerable. That's really important because I think that we project onto very young children that they are more capable, that they're more resilient, that they're more independent and more self-sufficient than they actually are. They're actually incredibly neurologically and emotionally vulnerable. There is the idea that they are born too early, that they should probably be inside of us for another 8 to 9 months. And so, they're born in the world meant to be on our bodies. So in other parts of the world, mothers wear babies on their bodies for the first year as if they're still in the womb. And there's a reason for that, because mothers serve in the first year as the central nervous system to babies. So when we take a baby out of our body and then within 6 weeks, we put it in daycare into a group environment with strangers and we remove it from our body, or we put it in a crib in a separate room than our room, or we let the baby cry it out at 3 months, what we're essentially doing is we are putting stress on a neurological system that's not meant to deal with stress. It's meant to be buffered from stress. So mothers they serve a few really important biological functions in the first 3 years. One is they buffer children from stress. 2 is they regulate children's emotions from moment to moment. Every time a mother soothes a baby or has skin-to-skin contact with the baby, she's basically regulating that baby's emotions and getting that baby's emotions from going too high and too low to a state of homeostasis. And that's really important because babies' brains are not meant to be under a great amount of stress. Very small incremental amounts, but not a great amount of stress. So the cortisol levels or the stress hormone levels in babies' brains are meant to remain very, very, very low in the first 12 months. And what we're doing is by separating them from us precociously and prematurely and putting them into these daycare situations, we're essentially exposing them to very high levels of stress. The problem with that is that when we turn a stress system on, a stress regulating system on, before it's meant to be turned on, because it's meant to really be offline for the first year, when we turn it on too early, it becomes the amygdala, this little tiny almond-shaped part of the brain that regulates stress in the brain, starts to grow and becomes highly active when it's not supposed to. And sort of like a light bulb in the kitchen or a balloon that gets overblown. It basically blows out and shrivels up. And when that happens, it ceases to be functional in the future, which is why you have things like ADHD, which is not a disorder, by the way, but which is a hypervigilance of the brain on stress. It's a child's brain on stress. It's the flight response of the fight or flight evolutionary response to stress. As human beings, we either fight our predators that are running after us or we flee from them. And ADHD is the flight part, and the aggression that we're seeing in children at a very young age in school. Children who are put into daycare at a very young age either become aggressive in daycare, or when they get to primary school, there's high levels of aggression. That's the fight part. So we're basically turning on stress in our children's brain before they're supposed to have stress. And then the brain doesn't regulate the stress going forward, meaning it can't regulate emotions, it can't deal with adversity. Bad stuff.
So when you have, your 2-year-old tantrum, how does one navigate that? Let's say separate from whether this child's being fully raised by a stay-at-home mom, part-time working mom, part-time nanny, but let's just say the child's tantruming. Is it possible for the child to experience a lot of stress at 2 or 3, even act out violently, like hit their sibling or something like this, and that's a natural form of development, as opposed to there's been some sort of trauma or an absence of care that child needed?
Right. So tantrums are normal. Tantrums are, what I would say is tantrums are like emotional blown fuses.